Do you feel like you're barely keeping your head above water? That no matter how hard you try, meaningful progress remains out of reach? Heather gets that. She battled an eating disorder for years before seeking help. Now in recovery, Heather is here to tell you that positive change is possible even when it doesn't feel that way. Join her as she shares openly about her struggles and small triumphs. Fair warning though, Heather doesn't hold back. Her candid story may trigger some. But for those wanting honesty, hope, and healing, this is 1% Better with Heather. The information and stories shared on 1% Better are based on host Heather's personal experiences with eating disorders and mental health challenges. Heather is not a licensed doctor, therapist, dietitian, or other health professional. Her advice and opinions should not be taken as professional medical advice. Please consult your physician or a qualified health provider regarding any medical or health-related issues. 1% Better also contains descriptions of eating disorders that may be triggering for some listeners. Discretion is advised.
Hey there, my little gappers, and welcome to 1% Better with Heather. Today I have a very special guest in the studio with me. I have Shannon Petrovich. I said it right, right?
Yes, you did. Good
Yay!
job.
Welcome.
Thank you so
Panic.
much, Heather.
So if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself to everyone and tell us all about you.
Okay. I'm a therapist and I'm also a coach now. I have I'm being a therapist for 35 years, mostly working with individuals, couples, families. I, about 6 years ago, decided I really wanted to help people that would never have access to therapy. There's a lot of information that we have as therapists and really wanted to share all of that. And so I started a YouTube channel called Therapist Talks, Thrive Beyond Narcissism. Started off actually general mental health, but then it became really obvious that narcissistic relationships and other toxic relationships were the main focus of what people wanted to know. And that became my main mission and focus. So I've done that for the last 6 years. It's now around almost 28,000, I believe, subscribers and 1.5 million views or something like that, which seems so unreal because, you know, when you're starting, you're going, oh my gosh, I made it to 10.
Yeah, right.
So it's very exciting. But from there, I decided I really wanted to write a book to help people do the healing process in earnest, because a 10-minute video is not going to get anybody there. So I wrote a book called Out of the Fog into the Clear, Journaling to Help You Heal from Toxic Relationships. So that is still on Amazon and Kindle and available. And then I decided also that people often need more help than that. So I started a small group support group and a masterclass video series of 12 weeks of videos and a couple of extra videos on really doing the healing process. So learning grounding skills, learning why you might have left the relationship, but you still feel horrible, and what that's about and why that actually is normal and how you get past that and actually start living and rebuilding your life. So that's healfromtoxicrelationships.com.
Wow, that's a lot. So I have some experience with narcissistic relationships. So can we start there? Can I ask you a couple questions about that?
Sure.
And it just seems like lately, I don't know if I'm on another planet with this, but maybe it's just me all over social media now, hearing a lot more about narcissistic relationships. And they've obviously been around since the dawn of time. But do you feel that you see a lot more people coming out in the last couple years even talking about this?
Yeah, for sure. You know, my first job out of college was working in a battered women's shelter, and we never spoke of narcissism, but obviously there was a lot of that going on that we just didn't even talk about in those terms. It was just abuse And I think the awareness around narcissism and toxic relationships has definitely grown. And there is more narcissism in our society, I believe, because people are sort of praised and applauded for being really selfish and arrogant and all about material things. But those are kind of narcissistic traits and not necessarily abusive, even to others, just obnoxious.
Right.
And so narcissism runs the gamut from mild traits all the way to severe, sort of serial killer level. And we have to be careful not to put people in the box that don't belong in the box if they just have some traits. And also not to use it as a weapon, because I've seen that too, where, especially young people seem to say, oh, I'm mad at my mom and she's a narcissist, or my dad told me off the other day, he's such a raving narcissist. And so we don't want to use the terms in ways that are completely non-productive, like just shutting somebody down and erasing them from your life. It's really important to learn also how we unfortunately kind of create and participate in unhealthy relationships by showing up placating or peacekeeping or people pleasing, and that we can create unhealthy relationships where another person is allowed to be very selfish and is allowed to be completely focused on themselves, and we never stand up for that for ourselves, and we end up in a toxic relationship and the other person is kind of blindsided. They don't understand what you're talking about when you say, you're not respecting me. So we have to show up with our whole selves, all our thoughts, feelings, wants, and needs on board right off the bat. I think a lot of times we show up so passive and then we're mad later, but we have to show up with our whole selves right off the bat and throughout a relationship. And then if somebody disrespects you, then you sever it and you don't return and reclaim that relationship. But if you haven't ever shown up, you've got to start there.
So, and not to get into generational trauma, but it kind of comes down from there,
Yeah.
right? Like you kind of see how your mom was treated and how your dad, and vice versa, right? And there's always this common saying about, oh, she married her dad.
Yeah.
And even though some of us will go to the ends of the earth not wanting to do that,
I'm
we
fine.
do it
did.
anyway.
Yep.
So,
Been there.
what's that all about? Fix me. No, just kidding.
Well, no, there's a really great book called The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. And he's just amazing. And the book's amazing. And the way he describes it, I really like, because he says, whatever we grew up with, we create templates in our lives. And so it isn't that we necessarily are exactly mirroring, but what happens is that, if my role and my sort of way of coping with my childhood was to be the mediator, rescue everybody, please everyone, deny my own thoughts, feelings, wants, and needs, and pour into others. That is the template for my future relationships. And so, of course, a lot of people will say, well, I'm just a narcissist magnet. Well, all of us are, but a narcissist is looking for somebody who will let them be selfish and self-absorbed and all about what they think, feel, want, and need, and not have any needs of their own. So of course they're going to gravitate to you if you are in that template, and they will love you because you're doing the thing the way they want you to do the thing, and you're not standing up for you. You will feel that love because that's what the kind of love you grew up with. So that's where I think that's a better way to describe it, that we have templates in childhood and we put those templates on every relationship throughout our lives until we take it out and look at it and go, whoa, that's not okay. I am not going to continue to be treated that way.
Yeah, and so how do you know if you're in a narcissistic relationship or you're not just dating a jerk? right? Maybe like, or your mom's just self-centered, as I will like, because there's self-centered and then there's narcissistic, right?
That's right.
So what are like the top three? Like, okay, they're just a jerk.
Well, like I said, there are traits, and then there's mild, and then moderate, and then severe. So in the severe range, it's pretty obvious. If this person doesn't get what they want, when they want it, the way they want it, they are exploding or imploding. There's the covert variety too, which I probably should talk about as well. But they'll explode or implode, and there is nothing they will not do to get their point across, that you need to be under their thumb, in their control. They will manipulate, and they will go all the way to violence or suicidal threats, because that's sort of the covert version. So the overt is more like aggressive, violent, bullying. The covert is like this implosiveness, this explosive implosiveness, this explosive victimhood, so that they are kind of torturing you with this martyr narcissist thing. I did a video called The Martyr Narcissist and the Craziness of Being Attacked from Victim Space. So it's a very twisted thing, and it keeps people hooked in for many, many years often. And it can be a parent, or it can be a partner, or even a sibling. Some people are hooked into really toxic sibling relationships as well. So, if there's this extreme behavior whenever they don't get their way, that's the severe end. Then you have sort of more mild, sort of those little mini explosions, mini implosions, and they're kind of training you over time to do what they want, the way they want it, when they want it, how they want it, and you're losing yourself over time. So if that is something that you relate to, then you have to just stop and talk to yourself inside your own head differently. So then the other issue, and I talk about this right off in my book and in our program, we have to look at the toxic relationship within ourselves first. Because if we are beating up on ourselves mercilessly all the time, then that is the same template that's going to connect with others who beat us up too emotionally. So we have to we have to figure that out, and we have to get rid of that. And we have to start to talk to ourselves like we're our own best friends. I'll often hear people sharing like, oh, I'm such an idiot. Oh, I'm so stupid. I stayed with him that long, or I'm such a jerk that I didn't see that sooner from her. All of those kinds of things. Well, would you say that to your best friend? No, I'd never talk to anybody in the world like that. Well, if you don't talk to other people in the world, then that's not your voice. That's mom or dad, or, the coach that emotionally beat you up in childhood. That's not you. You need to start using your own voice inside your own head to support, encourage, and grow your sense of self back into something healthy, or into something healthy if it never was there. So that's the really important foundational piece that everybody has to do. And then once you do that, then it's really easy to suss out when somebody is mistreating you, because you're not doing that too. And so then when somebody says or does something that's really obnoxious, you just sort of step back and laugh and go, no, you didn't. And yeah, you just did. And so, yeah, I'm done with that person. Or I'm going to confront that and speak up for myself, because I'm no longer beating up on myself.
Yeah, and that's so important. I always say, be your own cheerleader. You are the team VIP, MVP, MMNOP, all of them, right? Like,
Yep.
it's you, my friend. And it sucks being on a team for one. It really does. And it's tiring. But you got to do it, because if you've come from a certain way and you don't want to go back to that world, you got to keep hyping yourself up, because it is so easy to go back.
Right. Yeah. And then you may need to get feedback from other people. And I think that's why the support group and coaching and all these kinds of things is so critical, because you do feel crazy. And gaslighting is a real thing. And when somebody keeps telling you you're nuts, you start to buy into it and believe it. And that is some of the worst toxicity you can have, because you're then participating in your own toxicity, telling yourself you're nuts, accepting that you're wrong, you're bad, you're not doing anything right, all that stuff that they're pouring out on you. And then it's almost like you can see them step back and watch, because you're already doing it to yourself. So their work is done. They're like, ah, cool.
Yeah.
So we have to really look at that stuff. And when we stop doing that and we stand up for ourselves, then you can see if someone is worthwhile or not. Because I've actually worked with couples where somebody was just clueless, and they had set up such a one-sided relationship that both parties were kind of participating in this. It was toxic. But when the person who was sort of the empath, if you will, was started to gain their own strength and start to stand up for themselves, the other person was like, welcome aboard. I haven't, they were happy to have a full partner in the relationship. And they, backed up, respected, honored, and it was completely different. So we have to give ourselves that opportunity to grow into our whole selves and see what's there. And with your parent, if there's a parent who's toxic, really encourage young people to grow into themselves, set boundaries, communicate clearly. And if there's still disrespect and disregard, then absolutely distance yourself. But if you don't do that work with your parent, you're going to have a harder time doing it with other people. If you do it with your parent, then it's like, oh, everything else is a breeze.
So how do we, because, and I know because I've seen it around me, deal with this relationship that we're born into or bred into or whatever you want to say. And then some of us develop unhealthy coping mechanisms
Right.
over that. So, and then that's a whole nother toxic relationship to have to break up with.
Yeah.
Right. So how do we learn to let that go and let go of our unhealthy coping mechanisms?
I think it goes hand in hand, that when we start to know ourselves, respect ourselves, take care of ourselves, and encourage, coach, and support ourselves internally, then all of our self-destructive coping skills, because the difference between good coping skills and unhealthy ones is that the unhealthy ones might feel good in the moment, but they're destroying us emotionally, physically, spiritually. So we have to look at that and say, okay, is this a healthy coping strategy or is this destructive? And those ones that are unhealthy are by definition destructive. So when you look at that, why am I beating up on myself physically, by getting drunk and being hungover and feeling like crap, or getting involved in drugs, or even sex. Promiscuous sex is one of the self-destructive coping strategies that people use when they are internally not supporting themselves. Food addictions, all kinds of stuff. Even exercise can be an unhealthy thing when you are running after you've collapsed from a stress fracture. It's just things like that. You have to look at, is this healthy or destructive? Am I nurturing and nourishing myself, or am I numbing and self-destructing?
So what would be a really good first step to say we leave the abusive relationship, but we still have some toxic behaviors of our own? What's a good first step to start the healing process?
It's a really good question, and it's there are a lot of steps, and part of what happens is when you are in we're designed to react to stress by having a surge of adrenaline to our brain and our whole body to fight, flight. And if we can't fight or flight, we freeze. So that's all normal, healthy stuff. But if you've grown up in toxicity and in stress, your emotional and survival brains are on fire all the time. And so you actually kind of develop a flipped upside down, wired, screwed up, screwed up
Flipped your
wires
lid.
on your fire alarm. It's like having a fire alarm that goes off all the time. And then when there's a fire, it doesn't go off. And that's what it's like inside your head if you are coming out of trauma. So you feel like you're on fire all the time. So anxiety, depression, agitation, irritability, all that stuff is normal because you're just on fire. Your brain is just on adrenaline and other stress hormones all the time. Then if somebody dangerous comes along, so your fire alarm ought to be going off, you go into freeze mode and you shut down. And so a lot of people experience that getting into a toxic relationship as kind of numbed out. And that's kind of a dissociative process. So again, you have to recognize, take a break from relationships for starters. It's really unhealthy to go from one to the next because your picker is broken, your self-care is messed up, and all of it's just kind of and it's a hot mess. And you're going to be likely to do self-destructive and unhealthy things. So you have to, if you've been in those patterns, you have to give yourself a break. Then fix the toxic relationship within yourself. Begin to rebuild your sense of self so you know who you are and what you're about. And then do other things to meet other types of people so that you're meeting a broader spectrum of people that maybe have the interests that you have. Volunteer at the Humane Society, volunteer to help kids, volunteer to do something that sort of resonates with who you are. And then you'll meet people who are more like you and probably more empathic people because that's typically who volunteers. So if
Yeah.
you're an empathic person, you should not be meeting people in bars. Those are kind of predatory places. So it's kind of a lot, And in my book, and you can look it up on Amazon, and there's even the first, 20 pages is free, open it up. Even by page 4, I'm already giving you journal prompts to do the work to help you really clarify what it is you need to do and get going on it. So you can open that up and get going on it. It's about the way you're talking to yourself inside your head, writing it out. And where did that come from? Because we are not born with those self-hating messages. We're just not. That came from somewhere. And maybe it came from your interpretation of a parent being very depressed or a parent being very addicted. And you interpreted that as you're not worthwhile because they don't get out of bed to make you breakfast or what have you. So we have to look at how we created those stories out of what happened to us.
And I watched an interview with you, and you said something like the best line I've ever heard in my life, and I could have used you a couple years ago. Pick partners, not projects.
Yes.
Because there's people and I'm sure there's men too, but I know for me, and it's just like, oh, I can fix him.
Uh-huh.
I can fix him.
Uh-huh.
He just needs a little shine.
Yeah.
Just needs a shower.
Yeah,
Right?
and it's so seductive. It really is. And if you grew up with that template of fixing everybody and making everybody happy and mediating between everybody, then it's really tempting. And especially being groomed and trained as a therapist is really tempting. So we have to be really careful and recognize that brokenness is theirs to fix, not yours. And even in a relationship, we all have brokenness, but it's my husband's job to fix his and my job to fix mine. And then we support each other in that process. It's not me, sanding off all his stuff and him placating all mine. It's really each of us being fully grown adults coming to the table as whole people. And that's really wonderful. The other way is not so good.
No, and it's very odd when you get out of these sort of you, this world and you get into like normal land, and it's when you have a partner who doesn't have anything, like, I don't want to say like doesn't have anything in it, but my husband's not a yeller, he's not a screamer, he's not a fighter, he's not. I would argue with a wall. I should have been a lawyer, right? I'm like, just come on, and you're looking for him to like I'm throwing this at you. Why are you missing? Right? And it's frustrating.
Oh, that's awesome.
But, like, and it's a lot to process. And
Uh-huh.
it's like, oh, you're not supposed to yell and scream and have things fly through the air. That's
Yeah.
not normal,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So that takes a lot of self-awareness, I will say.
It really does. And when I met my husband, I was just floored because there were no games, there were no hidden agendas, there were no, approach avoidance, show up and then ghost. All that garbage was just not there. He was a totally open book, which I'd never really experienced in a person. And he really genuinely listened, and that was so unusual. And then, he's not a pushover. He's very strong and very assertive, but also not a bully and controlling. And so that is unusual, and it is worth waiting for, because the relationships that come from that perspective are wonderful, and we all deserve that. And truly, at that point, I was in a place where I would have been happily alone for the rest of my life if he hadn't come along. So I think we also have to know ourselves and care about ourselves enough to know we'd rather be alone than in another bad relationship.
Oh, that's so true. So true. Like, I got it right this time. I'm on my like third. But, hey, three times charm.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I'm happy for you.
Yeah, no, and like it's an amazing amazing partner and husband, and I'm not going to say like it's all hearts and roses around here because that's not life, right?
Right.
But, like it the bad days are very few and far between. We'll put
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
right? And that's what you want, right? You can't live in la la land and expect nothing bad to happen,
Right.
right? Someone's going to make you angry eventually, you know?
Yeah, and the difference is that you have, you do it respectfully, you don't do it hurtfully. You know that you're both on the same team. You're not battling against each other, and you listen. I always say to couples when I'm working with couples, if you're not in a both of us win mode, you're both losing. If it's a I'm going to win, he's going to lose, you're both losing. So when you have a solid, healthy partnership, then it's really important to listen and really respect and understand your partner fully, because we're different, and thank God we're different. But it's a journey to learn how to really communicate and really genuinely listen to somebody.
No, it is too. And something I've learned as well, like I know a lot of people have said, marriage is 50-50. And I'm like, well, sometimes it's not always 50-50. Sometimes it's 80-20. And sometimes it is 50, and sometimes it's 100% on him. I'm not going to mow the lawn. I'm going to tell you that right now. So, like, that's 100% him, but he's also not going to do the dishes. That's 100% me, right? So it's one of those like give and takes, right?
I actually think of it as 100. So I have to be, and again, this is only with a healthy partner, but I feel like I'm 100% in all the time and he's 100% in all the time. And that we have to give 100% in order to make it work, because life is challenging. But when we work together and talk with each other and support each other, at that 100, it's a beautiful thing, and we can laugh about the hard stuff and we can support each other through it. Whereas when people are sort of keeping score about, well, I did more of that and you did more of this, when we each sacrificially love each other, there's no scorekeeping.
Okay, then I'm going to start using that then. Because I'm 100% in and he's 100% in. I think he is. I haven't asked him lately. Uh-oh. I don't want to give him any options either. So how do we... I've been hearing a lot of this too, of people just no contact.
Yeah.
I'm just going no contact. And a lot of people say, oh, it's for my mental health. And that's probably true. When are the days that you say, or when's the time to go no contact? Like, can't ever again.
So if there's violence, and there are different relationships in our lives too, right? So if there's violence, that relationship needs to just flat end. Verbal violence, it may need to end also. But you can do miniature timeouts and miniature no contacts for periods of time. And if, depending on how important the relationship is, say you have kids together, you're going to have to deal with each other into the future. That's a situation where you really have to heal yourself and heal your ability to stand up for yourself, and go no contact as long as you need to, and then go partial contact, like we're only going to communicate about the kids and we're going to do it by text message or whatever, those kinds of things. Or maybe it's a parent, and for a little bit you need to pull away entirely because you're so enmeshed, and then you can do this healing, show up fully for yourself. I encourage people to get back in contact and see what happens. If you show up with your whole self, what happens? And I have seen amazing things happen where even past abuse is healed, and somebody, when you reclaim your sense of strength and your sense of self, and then you face that abusive person, there's something very powerful about it. And when that person apologizes to you, not that you're going to restore the relationship, but that is very healing. And again, that gives you the strength to go on to the next relationship with your whole self on board and not taking any of that stuff lightly, but really addressing it immediately if it shows up. So I think that it's important to, but if you're in a relationship where like somebody sort of has these little implosions or explosions, you say, okay, I'm going to talk to you later, and you hang up the phone. So that's like a short no contact, and that's important. You can walk out, leave the room, leave the house. If you give a number of those small ones and then their behavior changes, then that's great. If you give those small ones and they escalate into all-out war and violence and craziness, then that person is not able or willing to meet me anywhere. I have to be a complete doormat to be in relationship with them, and I'm not doing it. Never.
And it's that know when to hold them, know when to fold them.
That's
right?
right.
Know when to walk away.
Yeah.
And sometimes, like, I'm right there with you. Like, to go back and get an apology is nice. But knowing that it might not come, you got to be okay with that too, right?
For sure. And so when you go and do that piece of work, if you do it, if you write a letter, if you confront that person, if you call them on the phone or whatever, if you do that, it has to be for you 100%. And that is it's very healing to have that. But if they respond in a way that's really awful, you have to be ready to say, all right, gave you a shot. That's it.
And there's something so the power of picking yourself
Mm-hmm.
it is something that I can't even explain, that feeling
Yeah.
of no, like no one's ever going to um, treat me a certain way anymore, and I love me.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't come overnight. It didn't for me, and it's constant work. But
Yeah.
with people like you, with books and journaling and help and advice and YouTube, it's a lot easier.
I hope so. Because it's so unfortunately a big part of our world, and I've just seen so much nastiness between people over the years, and it just breaks my heart. And we really have to. We're the only ones that can change that, and so that situation doesn't change unless we change our participation in it, and we don't ever show up that way again in our lives. And that we take that responsibility, not to blame the victim on any level, but to take responsibility for now taking care of ourselves and taking care of our futures in all of our relationships. And again, the way we do one relationship is the way we do all of them. Like if you show up as a placater and peacekeeper in your parent relationships, you're probably doing it at work, in your friendships. If you are exhausted and drained after you hang out with a friend or your sibling or your parents, there's something unhealthy there. And again, it may be that you just have to show up fully. But it may be that you have set in motion all these relationships in which you are feeding others and you are getting drained, completely dry. And you can't pour water from an empty pitcher. And you can't keep getting your self-esteem by being everything to everybody. You have to take care of you.
Oh, truer words have not been spoken. Oh my God. Yes. Take care of you. You first.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yes. It's sometimes a little hard, but
That's kind of like when the
learning.
flight attendant says you got to pull your mask down and put your mask on first before putting your mask on your child. So even before taking care of your child, if you have kids, you have to take care of you, or you are passing out and they're like, well, what
Yep.
do I do now? So even if you have kids, and a lot of women as moms are notorious for being everything to everyone until they burn out. So it's just really important.
And that's so true. And it's just so easy to go down rabbit holes, right? And being a mom and you're everywhere and trying to be the best and have a show home and have the perfect kids and have the perfect marriage. Like it's exhausting. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's too much. And when you kind of get to a point of, I don't care what other people think of me.
Yeah.
I don't care at all. It's a lot easier. It is a lot easier. And that put your mask on thing is a thing. I've worked in emergency situations in a former life of mine. And yeah, it's a thing. I wish more people would actually like, I don't want people to pass out, but like experience it, like to know the true feeling of putting yourself first is okay and it's not selfish.
Yeah.
Because this is what's going to happen.
Right. Right. And that gets confusing for people too, being selfish and even having an abusive partner throw it up in your face. You're so selfish now. What happened? And recognizing there are certain things I need to do to keep this body and soul and mental health intact. And if your partner can't see that and honor that, that's really toxic. They're basically saying you don't get to exist in this relationship. You are merely my doormat. And that's important information when you're making a decision about whether you stay in that relationship or not. So when you start showing up for yourself, is your partner applauding you or are they getting mad? That's a really important piece of information.
That is Very true, because along with that, not taking care of yourself, being spread over 1,000 places, there's certain things going on inside your body that you can't see, right? And, and it's not just not sleeping, right? Or having a headache. There's a lot of other things that can come down the pipeline from that.
It's really profound and borderline scary. So that the book that I mentioned already, The Body Keeps the Score, is all about that. All the medical complaints that people have that are actually the manifestation of chronic stress and chronic trauma, low-level trauma, high-level trauma, all of it in between. And there's another one. There's a doctor named Gabor Mate, and he wrote The Myth of Normal. And that kind of speaks to what you were saying about perfectionism, because we generate this amazing stress within ourselves by trying to make ourselves perfect. So there isn't anything from the outside even going wrong. We are just, by virtue of being perfectionistic, we're torturing ourselves and we're stressing ourselves, and we're putting our mind and our survival systems on screech with our own story about trying to be perfect. And how sad is that? Like, I've known people there's nothing wrong in their lives. From the outside, everything looks fine. And they're in absolute agony inside of themselves because of that perfectionism myth. It's garbage.
And it'll try to kill you. I'm walking proof.
It can kill you. Yes.
And there is no such thing as perfect. I've tried. And even if
I never even tried. That was not my thing. A lot of things, but not
I always say too, like, the rainbow always moves, right? So even if you get to where you think, even it's like, if I lost 5 pounds, I'd feel so much better than myself. That you get there, and then it's like, what happens if I did another 5?
Yeah.
Rainbow's always moving.
Yeah.
So you're never going to be happy if you can't be happy with where you are right now.
Exactly.
That took a lot of therapy for me to even say that out of my mouth.
Yeah. Painful.
Well, I can't thank you enough for being here. So one more time, where can we find you on YouTube and your books?
So, which one first? So the book is Out of the Fog into the Clear, Journaling to Help You Heal from Toxic Relationships. The program of small group support and masterclass video series is healfromtoxicrelationships.com. And my YouTube channel is Therapist Talks Thrive Beyond Narcissism. Because there are a lot of YouTube channels that talk about narcissism, but I want people to thrive beyond narcissism. We're not about just wallowing in how that person was such a bad person. We're into, let's move forward.
Onward and upward, my friend.
Yes. And thank you so much for having me. This has been wonderful.
Oh, thank you so much.
That's all for this episode of 1% Better. To continue the conversation, head over to our website at www.1percentbetter.ca, where you can access more stories and resources. We'd also love it if you subscribed and left us a review on your favorite podcast platform. And remember, friends, progress takes patience, perspective, and sometimes a little help from people who get it. So be kind to yourself and others as we work to get 1% better every day. We'll see you back here next week.